Hello! This is day 71 of reading one canto of the Divine Comedy every single day. We are on Paradiso, Canto 4, which I'll read from the Longfellow translation before giving some quick comments. Between two viands, equally removed and tempting, a free man would die of hunger, ere either he could bring unto his teeth. So would a lamb between the ravenings of two fierce wolves stand fearing both alike, and so would stand a dog between two does. Hence, if I held my peace, myself I blame not, impelled in equal measure by my doubts, since it must be so, nor do I commend. I held my peace, but my desire was painted upon my face, and questioning with that, more fervent far than by articulate speech. Beatrice did as Daniel had done, relieving Nebuchadnezzar from the wrath which rendered him unjustly merciless, and said, Well see, I, how attracteth thee one and the other wish, so that thy care binds itself, so that forth it does not breathe. Thou arguest, if goodwill be permanent, the violence of others, for what reason doth it decrease the measure of my merit? Again, for doubting furnish the occasion, souls seeming to return unto the stars, according to the sentiment of Plato. These are the questions which upon thy wish are thrusting equally, and therefore first will I treat that which hath the most of gall. He of the seraphim, most absorbed in God, Moses and Samuel, and whichever John thou mayest select, I say, and even Mary, have not in any other heaven their seats, than have those spirits that just appeared to thee, nor of existence more or fewer years, but all make beautiful the primal circle, and have sweet life in different degrees, by feeling more or less the eternal breath. They show themselves here, not because allotted this sphere has been to them, but to give sign of the celestial which is least exalted. To speak thus is adapted to your mind, since only through the sense it apprehendeth what then it worthy makes of intellect. On this account the Scripture condescends unto your faculties, and feet and hands to God attributes, and means something else. And Holy Church under an aspect human, Gabriel and Michael represent to you, and him who made Tobias whole again. That which Timaeus argues of the soul doth not resemble that which here is seen, because it seems that as he speaks, he thinks. He says the soul unto its star returns, believing it to have been severed thence whenever nature gave it as a form. Perhaps his doctrine is of other guise than the words sound, and possibly may be with meaning that is not to be derided. If he doth mean that to these wheels return the honor of their influence and the blame, perhaps his bow doth hit upon some truth. This principle, ill understood, once warped the whole world nearly, till it went astray, invoking Jove and Mercury and Mars. The other doubt, which doth disquiet thee, less venom has, for its malevolence could never lead thee otherwhere from me. That as unjust our justice should appear in eyes of mortals is an argument of faith, and not of sin heretical. But still, that your perception may be able to thoroughly penetrate this verity, as thou desirest, I will satisfy thee. If it be violence when he who suffers cooperates not with him who uses force, these souls were not on that account excused. For will is never quenched unless it will, but operates as nature doth in fire, if violence 1,000 times distort it. Hence, if it yieldeth more or less, it seconds the force, and these have done so, having power of turning back unto the holy place. If their will had been perfect, like to that which Lawrence fast upon his gridiron held, and Mutius made severe to his own hand, it would have urged them back along the road, whence they were dragged, as soon as they were free. But such a solid will is all too rare. And by these words, if thou hast gathered them as thou shouldst do, the argument is refuted that would have still annoyed thee many times. But now another passage runs across before thine eyes, and such that by it thyself thou couldst not thread it, ere thou wouldst be weary. I have for certain put into thy mind that soul beatified could never lie, for it is near the primal truth. And then thou from Picarda mightst have heard Costanza kept affection for the veil, so that she seemeth here to contradict me. Many times, brother, has it come to pass that To escape from peril, with reluctance, that has been done, it was not right to do, even as Alcmaeon, who, being by his father thereto entreated, his own mother slew. Not to lose pity, pitiless became. At this point I desire thee to remember that force with will commingles, and they cause that the offences cannot be excused. Will absolute consenteth not to evil, but in so far consenteth as it fears, if it refrain to fall into more harm. Hence, when Picarda uses this expression, she meaneth the will absolute, and I the other, so that both of us speak truth. Such was the flowing of the holy river that issued from the fount whence springs all truth. This put to rest my wishes one and all. O love of the first lover, O divine, said I forthwith, whose speech inundates me and warms me so, it more and more revives me. My own affection is not so profound as to suffice in rendering grace for grace. Let him who sees and can thereto respond. Well, I perceive that never sated is our intellect, unless the truth illume it, beyond which nothing true expands itself. It rests therein as wild beast in his lair, when it attains it, and it can attain it. If not, then each desire would frustrate be. Therefore springs up in fashion of a shoot, doubt at the foot of truth, and this is nature, which to the top from height to height impels us. This doth invite me, this assurance give me with reverence, lady, to inquire of you another truth, which is obscure to me. I wish to know if man can satisfy you for broken vows with other good deeds, so that in your balance they will not be light. Beatrice gazed upon me with her eyes full of the sparks of love, and so divine that overcame my power, I turned my back and almost lost myself with eyes downcast. Although Dante cannot bring himself to ask the two questions that he has, Beatrice reads them in his eyes, in his face, and brings them up, answers them for him. The first one is kind of a repeat of the previous question that keeps coming up for the Paradiso, which is, how is it possible for many different souls to be both equal and not equal, is really how it comes down to it. The way it's asked this time is really coming from Plato. Plato theorized in Timaeus that when a soul dies, it returns to that star from which it came. Now, Beatrice denies this. He says, no, there's no affinity between their souls and this particular star or this particular sphere. It really just has to do with their deeds, with the deeds that shaped, the size and ability of their souls to dwell therein. But she also reminds him, look, there's no other heaven where, all the greatest saints, where Jesus Christ himself and Mary, the Mother of God, all sit. This is it. They are in heaven. They're okay, really. And then the second question is more along the lines of what the nun, Picarda, had said to him in the previous canto. And that was, well, if somebody forcibly removed Picarda, the nun, from the convent, how is that held against her? And Beatrice answers in the same way that I sort of did last canto, which is, well, remember, there was Picarda who left and then never really returned to the convent. She was forced out, but once free, didn't go back. Whereas Costanza, who was never freed, or at least it's somewhat implied that, she always wanted to. She always would have returned if it was allowed to her. Beatrice also makes a distinction between two kinds of will, which Mark Musa helps in making terms for. There's absolute will, and then there's conditioned will. The absolute will is never going to consent to the wrong itself. Picarda, for example, never said, I'm choosing to break my vow to the Lord. I'm going to leave the convent. Rather, it was her conditioned will, which was more along the lines of, I'm afraid of something worse happening, and so I have to do this in order to prevent that from happening. And then the canto ends with Dante asking a follow-up question, which is, okay, I understand how Picarda is held responsible somewhat for the breaking of the vow, but is there any way that she could have made it up to God? Or for anybody to make it up to God if they break a vow? And the canto ends on that question. We're going to get an answer in the next one. That's all for today, though. I'll see you tomorrow.